Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, show some love for one of Chicago's own, Mr. Hannibal
All right, everybody, let's welcome to the stage our friend Marc Maron.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
What does stand-up comedy in the 21st century consist of? What makes today's comedy different from stand-up from 25 years ago? Today's stand-up comedy can be defined by a number of different entities, or rather a collection of them, which include podcasting, YouTube, Netflix, or other outlets that couldn't have been utilized in the past. With the help of Curtis Shaw Flagg, Director of Operations at the Laugh Factory, and access to archives of countless hours of stand-up comedy and comedy podcasts, hopefully we can get to the bottom of the craft, or better yet, the art of stand-up comedy. An important question to begin with is, where exactly can stand-up be found? Well, for starters, YouTube. YouTube is a great outlet for comedians to share their comedy through many platforms. Lots of full-length specials are available from big-name comedians that are really only a click away.
Yeah, YouTube's another big one too. I mean, a lot of acts that you couldn't see now have clips that are available on YouTube. So a lot of people are kind of catching up to a lot of, especially the older acts, like your George Carlins, your Red Fox, these guys that really only had like comedy albums. And if you didn't go to see them in person, there was really no other way to kind of check them out. Now their clips are uploaded on YouTube, so you can see all of, like Richard Pryor, all of these like older acts as well. Mm-hmm. But I think it bodes well for the newer generation too, because they're uploading clips as well.
Totally. I'm single right now. I'm kind of happy about that though, because I used to associate relationships with like the bad part of my last relationship when it all went downhill. Like to give you an example of where we were at, we used to go on walks a lot. We were out on a walk one time and I saw some birds fly out of a tree. And I said, do you ever think birds take for granted the fact that they can fly? And she said, I can't do this.
Netflix and Amazon Prime also have a large archive of specials and stand-up sets. In addition to stand-up footage, commentary discussing content and acts can also be found in comedy podcasts. Podcasts hosted by stand-up comedians who host interviews, very often with other comedians. But how does podcasting affect stand-up comedy? Is it its own entity, or is it just a supplement or a promotion for stand-up comedy?
A little bit of both. I think the bigger ones are definitely their own entity, okay. But some who use that to kind of complement their stand-up, it's kind of a joined force effort to, I would say, meld together two different demographics. The demographic that necessarily isn't like your paying customer, I would say anywhere from the ages of like 16 to 21. Mm-hmm. And then, from 21 and up, those are, people who are coming out to shows that know a lot of these comics now from their podcast, but do go out and support them when they have a show, whether it be a one-off or weekly or monthly show.
For sure. Within podcasts, comedians can give listeners a behind-the-scenes look into the formation of bits.
There's a high level of scrutiny that you have to give yourself and give what you're doing. And, it's like there's a lot of bits that just don't ever work. They just, you got to eventually throw them in the garbage. They just don't, you're like, God damn it, there's something in here. And you just hammer at it and try to turn it into a sword. But nope, it's just a ladle. It's a ladle. It's going to stay a ladle. It just never works. It's just a stupid thing that you very rarely use. And it's just might have worked a couple times on stage in certain places, but it's just can't figure out the transition.
Or they can simply riff and create new possible bits.
That dot.
Right, yeah.
It's Steve-O and a dot.
I know, but nobody could even tell. So by the time I get up there, I got 80 firefighters, 18 cops, a helicopter, and a SWAT team. I'm like,
Yeah. The
and I'm like,
problem with that stuff is if something real was going down and they had put all the resources.
oh, trust me, I get it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm going to jail.
How long are you going to?
These podcasts are not just a novelty. They add flavor to today's comedy and help define what it means to be a comedian today.
So, what's the difference between being at peace and resolving a struggle? And what were those struggles for you from day one? I mean,
well, when I was here in Pasadena,
Yeah.
right, I had just come from Hawaii from high school. So some of it's just the same stuff that any kid when they're off to college you're going through.
right, yeah, time to break out.
You're breaking out.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out how to act right.
Yeah.
How much fun should I have versus how much work?
Yeah,
What's my work about? Because now nobody's telling you
right.
what you have to do.
Did you have a vision?
The question that must be asked is, where is the money to be made? These are questions that people in the comedy business think about every day. Each comedian has to be creative and persistent in getting gigs, since a good gig will only get a few $100s, and that would be if the comedian was headlining. An article in the New York Times quantified the struggles that stand-up comedians face coming up with a substantial income. Using anecdotes from 5 separate comedians, they showed that money can really come from anywhere. For example, for one comedian, more than 90% of his yearly salary consisted of payments from podcast sponsors. That's $60,000. He stated that when he got his first big sponsor, that it meant freedom. It meant I didn't have to hunt for ridiculous jobs. It meant my show had legitimacy. Now we can pay an editor and a producer. We turn comedy into an actual business. Ian Abramson, a Chicago-based comedian, took an interesting angle on comedy. He runs a show called 7 Minutes in Purgatory that Comedy Central picked up for their website recently.
One name in particular is a guy named Ian Abramson, which you will all see a lot of. He got passed. He does a show called 7 Minutes in Purgatory. Okay. It's a show that he runs where there's a stand-up comic that does their routine in isolation. In front of no audience, and there's a camera, and then the audience basically just watches them on a television screen, and so they do their entire act in front of nobody, and so they can't hear the laughs, they can't, there's no crowd work involved. It's a really unique and interesting show. He runs that now. Comedy Central just picked that up as a part of their website. Okay. And so he was one that when you saw him, you just couldn't quite put your finger on what it was because it was just so outside the box. But yeah, he's one that I can definitely say was very unique.
Sweet. So here's Ian, in a less than ideal scenario to perform comedy, standing in a separate room than his audience, wearing noise-canceling headphones, with 7 minutes of comedy to do, with no feedback whatsoever. His comedy is original, but also made funnier because of the setting he's created.
If 2 boys are working together, they will get half the amount of work done. But if 3 boys are working together, no work will get done. But what about 4 boys? You've got 2 sets of 2 boys and half a boy each, so then 4 boys is just 1 boy? Well, then what about 5 boys? You've got 1 set of 3 boys and 0 boys?
Well, I live in a pretty dumpy part of Atlanta. I live down near Turner Field, and it's not great. I'm thinking about inviting my landlord over for dinner, just so I can be like, hey, it's good? Oh, yeah, if you want to use the bathroom, fix it. Fix it, you piece of shit. The spaghetti was a trap. Get out of here.
Kidnapped. I wouldn't even know what to say. I paid off my student loans. I got a Nissan with low miles. Please stop cutting off my toes. That's not even a value. That's good credit. I don't think kidnappers would value that.
And when each comedian has a minute left, a light will turn on.
I swear I don't know. Oh, I got the light. God, that's a good sign. Okay. I'll wrap it up.
But while watching all these recordings, we must consider what is the value of live comedy shows.
There's really nothing like going out and seeing a comedy show live. There's some comics that you will watch a clip and you just don't get it, and it's not until you go and see them live that it kind of all the pieces are put together. I would definitely say there's a lot of comics that are way better live, than if you watch a clip, because you just don't connect the way you do when you see them in person.
Through stand-up, you can get to know the comedians through the stories he or she tells and self-analysis that they give on themselves. Content-wise, comedy is becoming more adventurous. The same types of comedians still exist, but novelty and creativity are distinctly awarded. Thomas Kane, a stand-up comedian who used to perform comedy in New York in the late 70s, answers the question, how have you seen comedy change?
The big change I think is going to be the obvious one is, I was doing open mic. I was doing, little comedy clubs, and this was in the late 70s, and over the years, the topic that you could speak about, the language, the sex, everything, just, the rule barrier was just taken down. And in the 70s when I was doing it, I was doing more open mic type stuff. You did kind of have to, stay in line. There was definitely some boundaries.
Modern stand-up comedy is what you make it. Generally, if it's funny, it will be accepted in its format. So we've established the different platforms where comedy can be found and each one's benefits, how there is more room to be creative than ever before, and how some things in comedy never change. After all this, the lesson I have learned and the advice that I would give to future comedians is that since the possibilities are endless, take chances wherever you can, because someone out there will laugh and there's someone who will want to showcase your humor.